The phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m., vibrating against the porcelain edge of the industrial sink where James Robinson had scrubbed grease-caked plates for the past 6 hours. He dried his hands on the stained apron hanging from his waist, fingers still pruned from dishwater, and pulled the device from his back pocket. The screen's blue glow illuminated the cramped back hallway of Hayes Family Diner, Branch 47, casting harsh shadows across his exhausted face. Dr. Patricia Chen, Cardiology. The name alone made his stomach drop. He swiped to open the message, heart hammering against his ribs in a rhythm that felt dangerously similar to the irregular beats they'd been monitoring in his daughter's chest for the past 3 months. Mr. Robinson, Brenda's latest echo shows increased irregularity in mitral valve function. We need to schedule stress testing this week. Please call office first thing Monday to discuss treatment options. Time sensitive. James leaned against the cold concrete wall, the phone trembling in his grip. 6 years old. Brenda was 6 years old, and her heart was failing the same way her mother's body had failed 18 months ago. Eaten alive by cancer that spread faster than hope could keep pace. He scrolled up through their text thread from that morning, stopping at the photo Brenda had sent from her grandmother's house. She'd drawn another picture during breakfast, this one showing a stick-figure man surrounded by what looked like dragons or monsters, their mouths open wide, teeth like jagged mountains. The figure held a sword made from a blue crayon, standing brave despite being outnumbered 50-1. The caption read, "Daddy fighting bad guys at work. Love you!" 3 exclamation points. That was Brenda. Always 3, never 2, never 4. Precision mattered to her, even in enthusiasm. James pressed his forehead against the wall's rough surface, eyes burning. The concrete felt solid, real, something he could trust not to collapse beneath the weight of everything threatening to crush him. Stress testing meant more specialists. More specialists meant more bills. More bills meant the $3,200 sitting in collections from her last emergency room visit would have company. He couldn't lose her. Not after Keisha. Not after watching his wife waste away in a hospital bed while insurance companies debated coverage for experimental treatments that might have bought her another year, maybe 2. Not after promising Keisha in those final moments that he'd keep their daughter safe, healthy, alive. The kitchen door swung open, flooding the hallway with noise and the smell of burnt coffee. Gary stuck his head through, his chef's whites spotted with grease and tomato sauce. "Yo, Michael, you good back here? We got a late rush coming in, need those plates moving." Michael Davis. The name still felt foreign in James's mouth, like wearing someone else's clothes that didn't quite fit right. He'd been Michael Davis for 3 days now, just another minimum wage dishwasher grateful for the work, invisible in the way that people who touched dirty things always were. "Yeah, I'm good. 2 minutes. Gary's expression shifted, suspicion creeping in around the edges. "You sick or something? You look like hell." "Just tired. I'll be right there." The door swung shut, cutting off the clatter of plates and the hiss of the grill. James deleted the message from Dr. Chen, then immediately regretted it and restored it from the trash folder. Information was power, even when that information felt like a knife twisting in his chest. He pulled up his photo gallery instead, scrolling past work documents and screenshots until he found the folder he'd labeled Home. The most recent photo showed Brenda on the front steps of his father's house in Grosse Pointe, where she'd been staying since James started this undercover assignment. She wore her favorite purple dress, the one with white flowers that Keisha had bought her for Easter 2 years ago. The dress was getting too small now, hem riding up above her knees, but Brenda refused to give it up. Purple had been Keisha's favorite color. Their daughter remembered that, held onto it like a lifeline to a mother whose face was already starting to blur in memory. James zoomed in on Brenda's smile in the photo, studying the gap where her 2 front teeth used to be. She'd lost the second one last month, wiggling it loose during dinner and presenting it to him with such pride, as if she'd accomplished something monumental. He'd put it in a small box with the first tooth. Both of them now sitting in his apartment alongside Keisha's wedding ring and the funeral program he couldn't bring himself to throw away. His wife's photo was tucked in his wallet, hidden behind his driver's license where he could see it every time he pulled out his ID. He fished the wallet out now, flipping it open. Keisha smiled up at him from the picture, her natural hair swept back in the braids she'd worn the day they got married. She'd been 23 in that photo, convinced they had forever ahead of them. They'd gotten 6 years. James pressed his thumb against her face, the plastic sleeve covering the photo smooth and worn from how many times he'd done this same motion. "I'm trying, baby," he whispered. "I'm trying to do what you asked." His phone buzzed again. Different sender this time. William Robinson. The name appeared on the screen in bold letters. No photo attached because his father had never bothered to set up a profile picture. Too busy running an empire to worry about personalization. "Progress report due Monday morning. Board wants numbers. Don't disappoint me." James stared at the message, jaw clenching. 3 days of scrubbing dishes, 3 days of keeping his head down and his mouth shut. 3 days of watching good people break themselves for poverty wages while corporate executives debated profit margins from air-conditioned offices 40 stories above the street. And his father wanted numbers. He had numbers. He had a 6-year-old daughter whose heart was giving out. He had medical bills stacking up like cordwood. He had the memory of his mother's face the day William Robinson fired her for taking too much medical leave while she battled the cancer that would eventually kill her. Linda Robinson had died 2 years ago in a hospice facility that smelled like bleach and resignation. She'd died because she couldn't afford the treatments that might have saved her. Couldn't afford them because the company she'd given 16 years of her life to had decided she was too expensive to keep on payroll. James had found the termination papers 6 months ago while cleaning out his father's home office, looking for tax documents. The paperwork was dated 16 years back, signed in his father's distinctive scrawl. Excessive absence due to medical complications. Position eliminated due to budgetary constraints. His mother had been pregnant with him at the time, sick with her first bout of cancer, terrified of losing the baby, and William Robinson had cut her loose like dead weight. James typed a response with hands that wanted to shake but didn't. "You'll have your report." He deleted it without sending. The kitchen door burst open again. This time it was Robert Cole, the branch manager. His tie loosened and sweat beading on his forehead despite the November cold seeping through every crack in the building's failing infrastructure. "Davis, you planning on hiding back here all night? We've got customers." "Coming now." Robert's eyes narrowed, taking in James's posture, the phone still clutched in his hand. "Personal calls on company time. That's a write-up. It was my daughter's doctor, medical emergency." The manager's expression didn't soften. "Everyone's got problems. We all show up anyway. That's the job." James bit down on the response, trying to claw its way out of his throat. Robert Cole made $47,000 a year managing this location, nearly double what the hourly workers scraped together. He had health insurance through corporate, had never spent a night wondering if he should pay the electric bill or buy groceries, had never held his child in an emergency room while doctors debated whether her condition was severe enough to warrant immediate care. "Understood. It won't happen again." Robert turned to leave, then paused. "You know what your problem is, Davis. You think you're better than this. I can see it, but you're not. You're just another guy washing dishes, and the sooner you accept that, the easier your life's gonna be." The door swung shut. James closed his eyes and counted to 10 in the darkness behind his eyelids. He'd learned the technique from Keisha back when his temper used to get the better of him. She'd put her hands on his face and made him breathe through the anger until it settled into something manageable. You can't fight every battle, James. Pick the ones that matter. This one mattered. Everything about this mattered. He shoved his phone back into his pocket and pushed through the kitchen door. The dinner rush had evolved into a late-night crowd, mostly teenagers nursing sodas and splitting appetizers. A few shift workers grabbing meals before heading to overnight jobs. Gary worked the grill with practiced efficiency, flipping burgers and dropping fries into oil that sizzled and spat. Jennifer, one of the waitresses, leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone between orders, her expression broadcasting boredom that bordered on contempt. And there, moving between tables like a ghost no one acknowledged, was the woman James had been watching for the past 3 nights. Karen Taylor worked the late shift, always volunteering for the worst sections, always taking the tables that other servers fought to avoid. She was slight, barely over 5 feet tall, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had started to come loose hours ago. Her uniform hung on her frame, the teal fabric washed so many times it had faded to something closer to gray. James had noticed her on his first day, had noticed the way she moved with her head down, shoulders hunched as if trying to take up less space in the world. She never took breaks, never sat down, never joined the other employees in the brief moments of downtime between rushes. And she never, ever ate. He'd watched during the lunch shift yesterday, had seen her serve tables for 6 straight hours without putting a single thing in her mouth except water from the kitchen tap. When another server offered her half a sandwich from an order that had been made wrong, Karen had smiled and said she wasn't hungry, thank you anyway. The smile hadn't reached her eyes. James plunged his hands back into the sink full of dirty dishes, muscle memory taking over while his mind worked through the puzzle that Karen Taylor represented. Her employee file sat in Robert Cole's office, and James had managed to get a look at it yesterday morning while the manager was dealing with a vendor delivery. 24 years old, 2 years with the company, 0 complaints from customers, 0 write-ups for attendance or performance. Perfect employee on paper, the kind of worker any business should celebrate. She made $14.50 an hour. James had done the math sitting in his car last night, parked in the lot of his apartment building with a calculator app open on his phone. 48 hours a week at $14.50 came out to roughly $2,900 a month before taxes. After federal withholding, state taxes, and the pittance that went to Social Security, Karen Taylor took home maybe $2,400. The apartment buildings in this neighborhood ran $1,200 a month for a studio, more for anything bigger. Add utilities, maybe $150. Transportation, even just bus fare, another $100. Health insurance through the company's plan cost employees $180 a month for the bare minimum coverage that didn't actually cover anything until you hit a $6,000 deductible. That left roughly $770 a month for everything else. Food, clothing, emergencies, life. For one person, it would be barely survivable. For 3 people, it was impossible. Because James had also discovered through careful questions posed to other employees who actually bothered to notice their coworkers that Karen Taylor had 2 younger siblings. Orphans, Gary had mentioned casually while prepping vegetables. Their parents died in a car accident a few years back, and Karen got stuck with the kids. 8 and 6, he thought, maybe 9 and 7 by now. Sad situation, Gary had said, shaking his head. But what can you do? Life's not fair. James scrubbed at a plate caked with dried ketchup, watching Karen through the serving window. She was taking an order from a table of teenagers who weren't paying attention to her, too busy laughing at something on one of their phones. Karen stood patient, pen poised over her notepad, waiting for them to notice her existence. One of the kids finally looked up, ordered without making eye contact, then went back to his phone. Karen wrote it down, asked if they needed anything else, got ignored, and walked away. Gary slid a plate of fresh fries across the counter. "Order up for table 7. Karen materialized at the window, picked up the plate without a word, and disappeared back into the dining room. James returned to his dishes, thoughts churning. He needed evidence. Suspicion wasn't enough. Observation wasn't enough. His father would demand concrete proof of whatever was destroying this location's profit margins, and James had to decide what story he wanted to tell. The truth would destroy Karen Taylor. The truth would probably destroy most of the people working here, actually, because the real problem wasn't theft or laziness or incompetence. The real problem was a system designed to extract maximum value from human labor while providing minimum compensation. A system his father had built and profited from for 30 years. A system that had killed his mother. The kitchen settled into rhythm, the familiar choreography of food service playing out like it had thousands of times before. Gary cooked. Jennifer served her tables with the bare minimum of effort required to avoid getting fired, and James washed dishes until his hands went numb. At 11:30 p.m., the last customers finally left. Jennifer clocked out without saying goodbye to anyone. Gary cleaned his station, made a crude joke about a customer's appearance, and headed for the door. "You good to lock up?" he called to Robert, who was counting the register in his office. "Yeah, get out of here." The back door slammed shut, leaving James alone in the kitchen with the hum of the industrial refrigerator and the drip of a leaky faucet. He finished the last of the dishes, dried his hands on his apron, and started breaking down his station for the night. The routine was soothing, mindless work that let his brain drift. He thought about Brenda, probably asleep by now in the guest bedroom at his father's house. Thought about Keisha, about whether she'd approve of what he was doing here, lying to everyone, playing dress-up in someone else's life. He thought about his mother and whether she'd be proud or disgusted. The storage room door creaked. James froze, hands still wrapped around the handle of a skillet he'd been about to hang on the rack. The storage room was supposed to be locked after closing, inventory controlled to prevent theft. Robert was paranoid about shrinkage. Had installed cameras in the dining room and kitchen last month to catch whoever was supposedly stealing supplies. Another sound, soft rustling like paper being unwrapped. James set down the skillet with exaggerated care, each movement deliberate and quiet. He crossed the kitchen on the balls of his feet, years of playing basketball in high school coming back to him in muscle memory. The storage room door stood slightly ajar, yellow light from inside spilling across the tile floor. He approached from an angle that would keep him out of the direct line of sight, then leaned forward just enough to see through the gap. Karen Taylor sat on an overturned milk crate in the corner, her back against the metal shelving unit. In her hands, she held half of a burger still wrapped in wax paper, the kind they threw away at the end of every shift when orders sat too long under the heat lamps. She ate quickly, mechanically, her eyes fixed on the concrete floor. Each bite was small, careful, as if she was rationing even this discarded food. When she finished the burger, she folded the wax paper with precise movements and placed it in a plastic grocery bag sitting beside her feet. The bag wasn't empty. James could see other containers inside, the clear plastic kind they used for to-go orders. Karen reached into the bag and pulled out a small foam container, opened it. French fries, cold and limp. She ate those too, every single one, her expression never changing. James's chest constricted. This wasn't theft. This wasn't someone being greedy or entitled. This was desperation wearing the face of dignity. When Karen finished the fries, she stood up and moved deeper into the storage room. James watched as she pulled a rag from her pocket and began wiping down shelves that were already clean. She organized supplies that didn't need organizing, checked equipment that was already shut off properly, spent 10 minutes making sure everything was exactly as it should be. Paying rent for the food she'd taken, James realized. Earning it through unpaid labor after her shift had ended. Trying to convince herself this wasn't stealing if she gave something back. She packed her grocery bag carefully, making sure nothing would spill or make noise. Then she slipped toward the back exit, moving with the practiced silence of someone who'd done this many times before. The door clicked shut behind her. James stood in the kitchen for a long moment, his reflection staring back at him from the stainless steel refrigerator door. He looked like a stranger to himself. When had the last time been that he'd really seen himself? Not just glanced in a mirror while shaving or checked his appearance before a meeting, but actually looked at who he'd become. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out, expecting another message from his father. It was Brenda instead, texting from his mother-in-law's phone. "Can't sleep. Miss you. When you coming home?" James typed a response. "Soon, sweet pea. Get some rest. I love you." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, then, "Love you too, Daddy," 3 hearts emoji. He pocketed his phone and made a decision. Tomorrow night he'd follow Karen Taylor home. He needed to see the full picture, needed to understand exactly what he was dealing with before he wrote his report, and handed his father the ammunition to either save this place or destroy it. But tonight, he was going to violate about 15 different corporate policies. James went to the office and pulled up the inventory system on Robert's computer, fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced speed. He'd grown up watching his father work, had absorbed the business by osmosis before he even understood what half the terms meant. Inventory management was basic. He adjusted the numbers for items that had supposedly sold during the shift, creating artificial shrinkage that would account for the food Karen had taken. Then he went into the employee records and looked up her schedule for the next 2 weeks. She was working every available shift, including doubles on Tuesday and Thursday. No days off until next Sunday, and even then she'd put herself down as available if they needed coverage. 52 hours next week at $14.50 an hour before taxes. That was about $754. Take home, probably $620. James closed the programs and shut down the computer, erasing any trace of his access. Then he grabbed his coat from the hook by the back door and stepped out into the November night. Detroit in winter felt like a physical presence, the cold pressing against exposed skin with malicious intent. James's breath formed clouds in the air as he crossed the parking lot to his car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic that had belonged to Keisha. He'd kept it after she died, couldn't bring himself to sell it, even though it made more financial sense to trade up to something newer with better gas mileage. The driver's seat still smelled faintly of her perfume, vanilla and something floral he'd never been able to identify. Some nights he sat in the car and just breathed it in, trying to remember the sound of her voice, the exact shade of her smile. Tonight he started the engine and pulled out of the lot, heading toward the apartment where he knew Karen Taylor lived. The GPS on his phone showed the address he'd pulled from her employee file. A building in a neighborhood that had seen better days several decades ago and hadn't recovered. James drove through streets lined with boarded-up storefronts and houses with bars on the windows, past corner stores protected by bulletproof glass and liquor ads. This was the Detroit that didn't make it into the comeback narratives, the Detroit that got left behind while downtown developers built luxury condos and trendy restaurants. Karen's building appeared on his left, a 3-story brick structure with paint peeling from the window frames and a front door that didn't quite close all the way. James parked half a block down, far enough to avoid being obvious but close enough to see the entrance. He waited. 20 minutes later, Karen appeared at the corner, walking quickly with her grocery bag clutched against her chest. She kept her head down, shoulders hunched against the cold, moving like someone who didn't want to be noticed. She climbed the exterior stairs to the 3rd floor, her footsteps echoing in the quiet night. Before she could get her keys out, the door to apartment 3C flew open. 2 children burst through the doorway, a boy who looked about 8 and a girl maybe 6. They threw their arms around Karen's waist, nearly knocking her backward on the landing. James rolled down his window, cold air flooding the car. Their voices carried across the distance, high and excited. "Did you bring food? We're so hungry. Mrs. Hayes only had crackers today." Karen's entire demeanor transformed. The exhausted, closed-off waitress vanished, replaced by someone warm and alive. She laughed, actually laughed, and herded them back inside. Through the partially open door, James caught a glimpse of the apartment. Bare walls except for children's drawings taped up in careful rows. A sagging couch that looked like it had been salvaged from a curb. A card table with mismatched chairs serving as the dining area. Karen unpacked her grocery bag on the table, dividing the food containers between the two kids. The boy got the leftover burger. The girl got the fries and what looked like half a sandwich. Karen took nothing for herself. The boy ate like he hadn't seen food in days, and maybe he hadn't. The girl was more careful, taking small bites and chewing thoroughly, making it last. A door opened in the neighboring apartment. An elderly black woman appeared wearing a bathrobe and slippers. She said something James couldn't hear, then handed Karen a small paper bag. Karen accepted it with gratitude written across every line of her body, thanking the woman multiple times. The neighbor smiled, patted Karen's shoulder, and retreated back into her apartment. Karen brought the bag inside and closed the door. Through the window, James watched as she opened the bag and pulled out what looked like a container of rice and maybe some vegetables. She divided that food between Tommy and Lily too, her movements efficient and practiced. The girl looked up at her sister. "Aren't you hungry?" Karen smiled. "I ate at work, sweetie. This is all for you two." The lie was so smooth, so natural, that if James hadn't known better, he would have believed it himself. He sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching this scene unfold. Community support happening in the gaps where systems failed. An old woman sharing what little she had because someone had to. Two kids eating garbage their older sister had salvaged because it was better than going to bed hungry. And Karen Taylor, 24 years old, starving herself to keep her siblings fed. James's phone buzzed. Another message from his father. Board meeting moved to Wednesday. Need your preliminary findings by Tuesday, EOD. Time sensitive. He stared at the words, then looked back up at the apartment window, where Karen was now helping the little girl with what appeared to be homework, the boy drawing at the table beside them. Everything suddenly made horrible sense. The secrecy, the exhaustion, the way she worked herself to the bone without complaint. She wasn't feeding herself, she was feeding them. James pulled up the calculator on his phone and did the math again, this time including children in the equation. 3 people on $620 a week take home. Rent in this building was probably $900 minimum for a 1-bedroom. Utilities in an old building with poor insulation, maybe $180 in winter. Bus fare for 3 people to get to school and work, $150. That left $190 for the month, for everything else. Food, clothing, emergencies, school supplies, medical care. About $6 per day per person. You couldn't buy dignity on $6 a day, but apparently you could steal it from dumpsters and convince yourself it was enough. James started his car and pulled away from the curb, his mind churning. He drove on autopilot, barely registering the streets passing by, until he found himself parked outside his own apartment building in a better neighborhood 20 minutes north. The contrast was obscene. His building had security cameras that actually worked, a front entrance that locked properly, no bars on the windows. He paid $1,400 a month for a 2-bedroom that he barely occupied anymore, spending most nights at his father's house with Brenda. He could afford it because he wasn't really Michael Davis, dishwasher. He was James Robinson, heir to a restaurant empire worth $340 million. The thought made him sick. Inside his apartment, James dropped his keys on the counter and went straight to his laptop. He pulled up the corporate financial records he'd downloaded before starting this assignment. Files that laid out exactly how profitable Hayes Family Restaurants really was. Last year's revenue, $89 million across 200 locations. Net profit after all expenses, $12.4 million. Executive compensation, $4.2 million divided among 8 people. He pulled up the personnel files next, scanning through salary information. The staff meal program that corporate had eliminated 8 months ago had cost $1.8 million annually to run. Eliminated to improve profit margins by 2%. Meanwhile, his father had received a $650,000 bonus for that fiscal year's performance. James closed his laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the hum of his refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic outside. His phone lit up with a notification. Photo from Brenda, sent from his mother-in-law's number. She'd drawn another picture. This one showed 3 stick figures, a tall one labeled Daddy, a medium one labeled Sad Lady with Briefcase, and a small one labeled Me. They were all holding hands, standing in front of what looked like a building with a sign that read, Work. The caption, I drawed you a friend at work. She looks lonely. Can we be her friend? James stared at the drawing, at his daughter's careful representation of something she'd only seen for 30 seconds through a phone screen. A 6-year-old had looked at Laura Mitchell, CFO of Hayes Family Restaurants, and seen what James had been too busy to notice. Loneliness. He texted back. Beautiful picture, sweet pea. Yes, we can be her friend. Time for sleep now. I love you. The response came immediately. Love you, Daddy. 3 heart emojis. Tell Sad Lady I said hi. James set his phone down and went to the bedroom, but he didn't get undressed. He sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing his work clothes that smelled like grease and dishwater, and pulled out his wallet. Keisha smiled up at him from behind the plastic sleeve, frozen in that moment of pure joy from their wedding day. She'd been so sure about everything back then, sure about him, sure about their future, sure that love was enough to build a life on. I don't know what to do, he whispered to her photo. If I tell Dad the truth, he'll shut this place down and put 23 people out of work. If I lie, I'm protecting a system that's destroying them anyway. The photo didn't answer. It never did. James lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and thought about his mother. Linda Robinson had been a good employee, according to the performance reviews he'd found in those old files. Reliable, hardworking, well-liked by customers. She'd given the company 16 years of her life. And when she got sick, when she needed them most, they discarded her like a broken piece of equipment that cost too much to repair. He thought about Karen Taylor, working 52 hours a week and still unable to afford food. Thought about her younger siblings, 8 and 6 years old, eating their sister's carefully portioned leftovers like it was a feast. He thought about Brenda and what would happen if his insurance company decided her heart condition was too expensive to cover. Whether he'd end up in Karen's position, stealing food to keep his daughter alive. The phone buzzed one more time. James picked it up, expecting another message from Brenda or his father. It was Laura Mitchell instead. Mr. Davis, I need to speak with you tomorrow morning before your shift. Please arrive at 7 a.m. Regards, Laura Mitchell, CFO. James read the message 3 times, searching for context he couldn't find. Laura Mitchell had been at the restaurant earlier, conducting some kind of audit that had Robert Cole nervous and the other employees whispering. She'd barely acknowledged James's existence, too focused on spreadsheets and inventory reports. What could she possibly want with a dishwasher? He typed a response. Understood. I'll be there. Then he set his phone on the nightstand, closed his eyes, and tried to sleep. But all he could see was Karen Taylor dividing food between 2 hungry children, sacrificing herself 1 meal at a time, convinced she was doing the right thing. All he could see was his mother's face in those final weeks, pain etched into every line while she apologized for being such a burden. All he could see was Brenda's drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands, the sad lady with a briefcase who needed a friend. James Robinson had come to Branch 47 expecting to find lazy workers or corrupt managers, some simple explanation for why this location hemorrhaged money while others thrived. Instead, he'd found something far more complicated. He'd found genuine human struggle happening right under his family's nose. People breaking themselves trying to survive on wages designed to extract maximum profit while providing minimum sustenance. He'd found the cost of his father's empire, measured in stolen leftovers and empty stomachs, and he had no idea what he was going to do about it. James arrived at Branch 47 at 6:52 a.m., 8 minutes early for a meeting he didn't understand. The parking lot was empty except for a silver Mercedes sedan parked near the entrance, its Michigan plates catching the weak November sunlight breaking through cloud cover. Laura Mitchell's car. He'd seen her arrive in it yesterday, watched her spend 30 seconds sitting behind the wheel with her eyes closed before gathering her briefcase and stepping into the cold. The front door was unlocked. James pushed through into the dining room where fluorescent lights hummed overhead and the smell of stale coffee lingered from yesterday's pots. The restaurant felt different when empty, exposed somehow, like a stage set waiting for actors to bring it to life. Laura Mitchell sat at a corner booth, laptop open in front of her, a thermos of what James assumed was coffee beside her right hand. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than James made in a month as Michael Davis. Her dark hair pulled back in a style that looked professional and severe. She glanced up as he approached, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Davis, thank you for coming early." James slid into the booth across from her, keeping his posture relaxed even though every instinct screamed caution. "You said it was important." Laura studied him for a moment that stretched too long, her gaze sharp and analytical. Then she closed her laptop and folded her hands on the table. "I've been reviewing personnel files for this location. You've been here 3 days, correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "Your application says you moved to Detroit from Cleveland 2 months ago. Looking for a fresh start after a difficult period." James had memorized the backstory he'd constructed for Michael Davis, had practiced the details until they felt natural. "That's right. And before that you worked in food service for 6 years, various positions, mostly kitchen staff." "I'm good with my hands. Dishes, prep work, whatever needs doing." Laura's eyes narrowed slightly. "Your references all checked out. 3 former managers spoke highly of your work ethic and reliability." Because James had paid a service to create those references, had invested $2,000 in building a bulletproof fake identity, complete with employment history and credit record. Money well spent when you needed to disappear into someone else's life. "I try to show up and do the job." Laura opened her laptop again, turned it so James could see the screen. A spreadsheet displayed numbers in neat columns, data organized with mathematical precision. "Do you know what this is?" James scanned the information, recognizing financial reports even though he pretended not to. "Looks like accounting stuff, above my pay grade. This is Branch 47's performance data for the last 18 months. Revenue, labor costs, inventory shrinkage, customer satisfaction scores." Laura's finger traced down a column highlighted in red. "Notice anything interesting?" James studied the numbers with feigned concentration. Revenue had declined 12% year over year. Labor costs had increased 8% despite stagnant wages. Inventory shrinkage showed unexplained losses averaging $800 per month. "Things don't look great." "That's diplomatic." Laura closed the laptop again. "This location is hemorrhaging money. Corporate wants it shut down." The words landed like a physical blow, even though James had known they were coming. 23 employees, 23 people who would lose their paychecks, their health insurance, whatever fragile stability they'd managed to build. Karen Taylor would lose everything. That's a lot of people out of work. Laura's expression shifted, something softer breaking through the professional mask. Yes, it is. So why tell me? I'm just a dishwasher. Because in 3 days, you've never been late. You've never complained. You work harder than people who've been here for years. She paused, choosing her words carefully. And yesterday, I watched you give Karen Taylor money for food after she collapsed during her shift. James's stomach dropped. He'd thought he'd been discreet, had waited until they were alone in the kitchen before pressing a $20 bill into Karen's hand and telling her it wasn't charity, just one human being helping another. She needed help. Most people wouldn't have noticed, or if they noticed, they wouldn't have cared. Laura leaned forward slightly. I'm trying to understand this place, Mr. Davis. I'm trying to figure out if it's worth saving or if corporate is right to cut their losses. And I think you see things other people miss. James met her gaze, recognizing something in her expression that he hadn't expected. Not suspicion or calculation, but genuine uncertainty. Laura Mitchell was asking for help, even if she couldn't quite bring herself to phrase it that way. What do you want to know? The truth. What's really happening here? Before James could answer, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out, saw Brenda's name on the screen, and his heart stuttered. I need to take this. It's my daughter. Laura nodded, and James stepped away from the booth, pressing the phone to his ear. Daddy? Brenda's voice sounded small and frightened, nothing like her usual bright confidence. What's wrong, sweet pea? My chest hurts, really bad. Grandma called the ambulance. The world tilted sideways. James gripped the edge of a nearby table, forcing himself to breathe. Where are you right now? Still at Grandma's house. But they're coming. I'm scared, Daddy. Listen to me, baby girl. The ambulance people are going to help you, okay? They're going to take you to the hospital and the doctors are going to make you feel better. Will you come? I'm leaving right now. I'll be there before you know it. Promise? James swallowed against the tightness in his throat. I promise. You're going to be fine, Brenda. Mommy's angel is watching over you, remember? A shaky breath on the other end. Okay. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweet pea. So much. The call ended. James turned to find Laura standing a few feet away, her expression transformed into something that looked like concern. Is everything all right? My daughter has a heart condition. She's having an episode. I need to go. James was already moving toward the door when Laura's voice stopped him. Which hospital? Children's Hospital of Michigan. I'll drive you. James paused, hand on the door handle. You don't have to. Your hands are shaking. You're in no condition to drive. Laura grabbed her coat from the booth and her car keys. And before you argue, this isn't charity, it's common sense. They didn't speak during the drive. Laura navigated Detroit traffic with efficient precision while James stared out the window, watching the city blur past. His phone rang twice, both times his mother-in-law updating him on Brenda's status. Conscious, talking, scared. The ambulance had arrived. They were transporting her now. Laura drove faster without being reckless, cutting minutes off the journey through route choices that suggested she knew the city well. They arrived at the hospital 15 minutes later. James was out of the car before Laura had fully parked, jogging toward the emergency entrance. The automatic doors slid open and he rushed to the reception desk, words tumbling out too fast. My daughter, Brenda Robinson, 6 years old, she was brought in by ambulance. The receptionist typed something into her computer. She's being evaluated now. The doctor will come speak with you shortly. If you'll have a seat in the waiting area, I need to see her. Sir, the medical team needs space to work. As soon as they're ready, someone will come get you. James wanted to argue, wanted to push past the desk and find Brenda himself, but Laura appeared at his elbow with a steadying presence. Thank you. We'll wait. She guided James toward a row of plastic chairs bolted to the floor, sat down beside him. The waiting room held a dozen other people, all wearing the same expression of barely controlled anxiety. A man paced near the vending machines. A woman clutched a rosary, lips moving in silent prayer. James buried his face in his hands. His entire body vibrated with the need to do something, anything except sit here useless while his daughter suffered somewhere beyond his reach. Laura's hand settled on his shoulder, warm and solid. She's going to be okay. You don't know that. No, but I know Children's Hospital has one of the best pediatric cardiology departments in the state. And I know your daughter is strong, because she has you for a father. James looked up at her, this woman he barely knew who'd driven him here without hesitation. Why are you doing this? Laura's hand dropped away, but she didn't retreat. Because 18 months ago, I sat in a waiting room like this one, waiting to hear if my mother would survive a stroke. And I was alone. Nobody should have to be alone for this. Before James could respond, a door opened and a doctor emerged, scanning the room. Family of Brenda Robinson? James was on his feet instantly. That's me. I'm her father. The doctor approached, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and tired lines around her mouth. I'm Dr. Sarah Park, pediatric cardiology. Brenda's stable now. We've given her medication to regulate her heart rhythm. Can I see her? In a moment. First, I need to explain what's happening, Doctor. Park gestured for them to sit, then pulled up a chair facing them. Brenda has a mitral valve prolapse that's causing significant regurgitation. The valve isn't closing properly, which puts strain on her heart. James already knew this, had heard it 3 months ago during Brenda's initial diagnosis. The medication was supposed to help. It's managing the symptoms but not addressing the underlying problem. We need to do a stress echocardiogram to see how her heart responds to physical activity. Based on those results, we may be looking at surgical intervention. The word surgery hit James like a fist. How soon? We're scheduling the echo for tomorrow morning. After that, we'll have a better picture of our timeline. Dr. Park's expression softened. I know this is frightening, but Brenda's young and otherwise healthy. Those are significant advantages. What's the surgery involve? If we determine repair is necessary, we'll likely do a minimally invasive mitral valve repair. It's a significant procedure, but the success rate is very high for pediatric patients. Laura spoke for the first time since the doctor arrived. What's the recovery timeline? Hospital stay of 5 to 7 days, followed by 6 to 8 weeks of limited activity. Most children return to normal function within 3 months. James's mind was already calculating costs. The surgery itself would easily run $80,000 to $100,000. His insurance through the company covered 80% after the deductible, which meant he'd be responsible for $20,000 minimum, probably more once all the associated costs factored in. Money he didn't have. Money he couldn't get without revealing who he really was. Can I see her now? Dr. Park stood. Follow me. Brenda was in a pediatric examination room, propped up on a hospital bed that made her look impossibly small. She wore a hospital gown covered in cartoon characters, electrode patches stuck to her chest, an IV line running into her left arm. Her eyes were red from crying, but she managed a weak smile when James entered. Daddy. James crossed to her side, took her hand carefully around the IV. Hey, sweet pea. How are you feeling? Tired. My chest doesn't hurt anymore, though. That's good. That's really good. James brushed hair back from her forehead, his hand trembling. The doctors are going to take good care of you. Brenda's gaze shifted past him to where Laura stood in the doorway. That's the sad lady from my picture. Laura stepped forward, her professional composure cracking into something genuine. Hello, Brenda. Your father showed me your drawing. It was beautiful. You're not supposed to be sad. Sad makes your heart hurt. Laura's eyes glistened, but she smiled. You're very wise for 6 years old. I'm almost 7. My birthday's in January. Brenda looked between Laura and James. Are you Daddy's friend? James started to answer, but Laura beat him to it. I think so. Yes. Good. Daddy needs friends. He's lonely too, even though he doesn't say it. The simple honesty of it stripped away pretense. James couldn't speak, couldn't form words around the truth his daughter had just casually exposed. Laura sat down in the chair beside the bed. What else did you draw in your picture? All of us holding hands, because that's what friends do. Your dad's very lucky to have you. Brenda yawned, the medication pulling her towards sleep. He's the best daddy in the whole world. Mommy said so. James squeezed her hand gently. Get some rest, sweet pea. Will you stay? I'm not going anywhere. Brenda's eyes drifted closed, her breathing evening out into the rhythm of sleep. James sat holding her hand, watching her chest rise and fall, counting each breath like a prayer. Laura remained in her chair, silent but present. After several minutes, she spoke quietly. She's remarkable. She's everything. I can see that. James looked at Laura properly for the first time since they'd arrived. She'd shed her CFO armor somewhere between the parking lot and this hospital room, revealing someone who understood what it meant to sit vigil beside someone you loved. Thank you. For driving me. For staying. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. You could have just let me go, could have gone back to your audit and your spreadsheets. Laura's expression tightened. Those spreadsheets represent people's lives, their jobs, their families, their ability to survive. It's easy to forget that when you're looking at numbers on a screen. But you don't forget. I try not to. She paused, studying him with that same analytical intensity from earlier. Who are you really, Michael Davis? The question hung in the air between them. James could lie, could maintain the fiction he'd constructed so carefully, but sitting here beside his daughter, watching Laura Mitchell reveal her own loneliness and doubt, the deception felt suddenly unbearable. Someone trying to figure out the right thing to do. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give right now. Laura stood, smoothing her suit jacket. I need to get back to the restaurant. Will you be all right here? Yeah, my mother-in-law is on her way. Call me if you need anything. Laura pulled a business card from her wallet and set it on the bedside table. My personal cell is on the back. She was at the door when James spoke again. Laura, she turned. You're not sad. You're just tired of being strong alone. Something shifted in her expression, vulnerability breaking through. Then she nodded once and left. James sat with Brenda for another hour until his mother-in-law arrived, a woman in her early 60s who'd aged 10 years since losing her daughter. They embraced without words, united in their shared terror of losing someone else they loved. I'll stay with her, Patricia said. You need to go to work. I'm not leaving her. James! Patricia gripped his shoulders. You need this job. You need the insurance. Brenda needs you to keep it together. She was right, and James hated it. Hated that survival meant abandoning his daughter in a hospital bed. Hated that the system demanded he choose between being present for the person he loved most and maintaining the financial stability that paid for her care. He kissed Brenda's forehead, promised he'd be back tonight, and walked out of the hospital into afternoon sunlight that felt wrong. The world shouldn't be bright when his daughter was hooked to monitors, fighting a heart that refused to work properly. Laura's Mercedes was gone from the parking lot. James called an Uber and rode back to Branch 47 in silence. The lunch rush was in full swing when he arrived. Gary worked the grill with his usual efficiency. Robert barked orders at servers, and Karen Taylor moved between tables like she'd never collapsed the day before. James changed into his work clothes and took his position at the dish station, falling into the mindless rhythm of spray, scrub, rinse, stack. But his mind stayed at the hospital, calculating costs and timelines and impossible choices. The afternoon crawled past. James worked through his usual break, needing the distraction of labor to keep darker thoughts at bay. Around 3 p.m., during a lull between lunch and dinner, Laura Mitchell walked through the front door. She'd changed clothes, trading her suit for jeans and a sweater that made her look younger, more approachable. She carried a laptop bag and what appeared to be files tucked under one arm. Robert materialized from his office, nervous energy radiating from every movement. "Ms. Mitchell, I wasn't expecting you back today. I need to review some additional data. Is the office available?" "Of course. Whatever you need." Laura disappeared into Robert's office and closed the door. For the next 2 hours, James watched her through the window, studying documents and typing notes. She emerged twice to speak with employees, asking questions about scheduling and workflow that Robert clearly didn't appreciate. At 5:30, she called James into the office. Robert hovered in the doorway. "Ms. Mitchell, I don't think this won't take long. Close the door on your way out, please." Robert's face reddened, but he retreated. The door clicked shut. Laura gestured for James to sit. "How's Brenda?" "Stable. They're doing the echo tomorrow morning. And you came back to work." "Didn't have much choice." Laura's expression hardened. "Tell me something, Michael. How much does this company pay for health insurance?" James blinked at the sudden shift. "Employees pay $180 a month for the base plan. Deductible is $6,000. And if you need surgery, insurance covers 80% after the deductible. So if Brenda needs the surgery Dr. Park mentioned, you're looking at roughly $20,000 out of pocket." James hadn't mentioned the potential surgery to Laura, which meant she'd either guessed or done research. "Roughly. How long would it take you to save that kind of money on a dishwasher's salary?" The question was rhetorical, but James answered anyway. "Years, if I could save it all." Laura pulled a file from her stack and opened it. "This is the employee benefits summary for Hayes Family Restaurants. The company pays an average of $4,200 per employee annually for health coverage. But the plans are designed to minimize payout. High deductibles, low coverage caps, narrow networks." "I'm aware. Meanwhile, executive health plans cost the company $18,000 per person annually. Full coverage, zero deductible, nationwide networks." She closed the file. "We spend more on 8 executives than we do on 600 employees." James said nothing. Anything he contributed would risk revealing knowledge that Michael Davis shouldn't possess. Laura leaned back in her chair, studying him. "I've been auditing this location for 3 days. Do you know what I've found? Numbers don't add up. The numbers are fine. Revenue is down, yes, but that's consistent with demographic shifts in this neighborhood. Labor costs are up because turnover is through the roof. Inventory shrinkage exists because people are hungry and the company stopped feeding them." James's pulse quickened. "You know about the staff meal program. I know corporate eliminated it 8 months ago to save $1.8 million annually. I also know that decision has cost us far more in lost productivity, training expenses, and employee theft. So you'll recommend reinstating it?" "I'll recommend a lot of things. Whether anyone listens is a different question." Laura's gaze intensified. "But I need to understand something first. I need to know if the people working here are worth saving." "What kind of question is that?" "An honest one. If I fight for this location, if I go to war with corporate over restructuring benefits and wages, I need to know the employees here will use those resources to build better lives. Not just survive, but actually thrive." James thought about Karen Taylor dividing leftovers between 2 hungry children. Thought about Gary making extra food at the end of shifts and pretending it was accidental. Thought about his mother who'd worked herself sick for a company that discarded her without hesitation. "You want to know if we're worthy of basic human decency?" "That's not what I—" "Yes, it is." James stood, anger rising. "You're asking if poor people deserve food and health care and dignity, as if those things aren't rights but privileges you get to grant or withhold based on some test of character." Laura's face went pale. I'm trying to help. No, you're trying to justify a system that's fundamentally broken by finding exceptions that prove you're one of the good ones. That's not fair, isn't it? James paced the small office, words spilling out faster than he could control them. Karen Taylor works 50 hours a week for this company. She's never late, never complains, does whatever you ask her to do, and she's starving herself to feed her orphaned siblings because your spreadsheets decided employee meals weren't cost-effective. Laura went very still. How do you know that? Too late, James realized his mistake. Michael Davis shouldn't know Karen's situation in such detail. Everyone knows. They just don't care. But you care. Someone has to. Laura stood, moving around the desk until she was directly in front of him. Who are you? And don't give me that vague non-answer again. Nobody talks like you do, thinks like you do, understands corporate finance the way you clearly understand it. You're not just a dishwasher. James met her gaze, seeing the determination there, the refusal to let this go. He could walk away, could quit this job and disappear back into his real life. But that would mean abandoning Karen and everyone else struggling to survive on poverty wages. It would mean becoming his father. If I tell you the truth, everything changes. Everything's already changing, Michael, or whoever you really are. James pulled out his phone, navigated to his photo gallery, and showed Laura a picture he'd taken 3 weeks ago. It showed him standing in his father's office and wearing a tailored suit, holding a glass of whiskey while William Robinson discussed quarterly projections. Laura stared at the photo, recognition dawning slowly. That's William Robinson, CEO of Hayes Family Restaurants. My father. And you're James Robinson. I've been undercover here for 3 days, sent to figure out why this location is failing. Laura took a step back, her expression cycling through shock, anger, and something that might have been betrayal. You've been lying to everyone. Yes. To me. Yes. Why? James pocketed his phone. Because my father built this company on my mother's corpse. Because 16 years ago, when she was pregnant with me and fighting cancer, he fired her for missing too much work. Because she died 2 years ago in a hospice facility, unable to afford the treatments that might have saved her, and nobody at this company even noticed. The words hung between them, raw and painful. Laura's voice came out barely above a whisper. He fired his own wife? Ex-wife by then. She'd left him when she realized he loved the business more than his family. James laughed bitterly. Ironic, isn't it? She left to protect me from exactly the kind of man he wanted me to become. And here I am playing dress-up in the lives of people he sees as line items on a balance sheet. What happens when you file your report? That depends on what I find. And what have you found? James thought about the question. About Karen dividing food. About Gary making extra burgers. About his daughter lying in a hospital bed because the insurance his company provided wasn't designed to actually protect people. I found out that my father's empire is built on suffering, and I don't know if I can live with that anymore. Laura was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then she moved to the window overlooking the kitchen, watching employees work through the early dinner prep. What are you going to tell him? I don't know yet. You could recommend closing this location, put 23 people out of work and save the company money. I could. Or you could recommend keeping it open, implementing changes that might actually help people, and risk your father seeing you as weak or idealistic. That's about right. Laura turned back to face him. What would Brenda want you to do? The question hit James harder than any accusation could have. He thought about his daughter's drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands. Thought about her telling Laura that being sad made your heart hurt. She'd want me to help people, no matter the cost. Then that's what you should do. James studied Laura's face, searching for judgment or manipulation, finding only exhausted sincerity. Why do you care? You don't know these people. You don't owe them anything. Because 18 months ago I watched my mother die in a hospital bed while I sat alone in a waiting room wishing someone cared enough to stay. Laura's voice cracked. And today you let me be that someone for your daughter. You trusted me with the most important person in your life, even though I was essentially a stranger. You drove me to the hospital. That's not the same as... It's exactly the same. It's seeing someone in pain and choosing to show up. She crossed back to the desk, gathered her files. I'm going to recommend comprehensive restructuring of this location. Reinstated meal program, improved benefits, higher base wages. The board will fight me, your father will fight me, but I'm done pretending numbers matter more than people. You'll lose your job. Maybe. Or maybe I'll finally remember why I wanted this job in the first place. Before James could respond, shouting erupted from the kitchen. They rushed out to find Robert standing in the center of the room, holding what looked like security camera footage on his tablet. I knew it, Robert said, his voice carrying across the space. I knew someone was stealing. Karen Taylor stood frozen by the drink station, her face drained of all color. Robert turned the tablet so everyone could see. The footage showed Karen in the storage room late at night, packing food into her grocery bag. This is from last week before we installed the new cameras, but I pulled the archives and guess what? 6 months of this, 6 months of systematic theft. Karen's lips moved, but no sound came out. Robert's expression was triumphant and cruel. Company policy is clear. Theft of any kind is grounds for immediate termination. You're fired, effective now. James started forward, but Laura grabbed his arm. Wait! I can't let this happen. If you reveal yourself now, you compromise everything. Let me handle this. Laura stepped into the center of the kitchen, her voice cutting through the tension. Mr. Cole, I need you to stop right there. Robert turned, annoyed. Miss Mitchell, this doesn't concern you. This is a personnel matter. Actually, as CFO conducting an official audit of this location, every personnel matter concerns me. Laura moved to stand beside Karen. What exactly are we looking at in this footage? Theft, plain as day. I see an employee taking food that was designated for disposal. Is that correct? Robert faltered. Well, yes, but... And this food was going to be thrown away? That's not the point. It's still company property until it's in the dumpster. Laura pulled out her phone, tapped a few buttons, then turned the screen toward Robert. According to the Employee Handbook, Section 12.4, food waste disposal follows specific protocols. Items deemed unfit for sale may be consumed by employees on premises or donated to local shelters. At no point does the policy state that eating designated waste constitutes theft. Robert's face reddened. That's semantics. No, that's corporate policy, which you, as manager, are required to follow. James watched this unfold, stunned. Laura had memorized the Employee Handbook thoroughly enough to cite specific sections from memory. Karen found her voice finally, small and shaking. I have 2 siblings, 8 and 6 years old. Our parents died 3 years ago in a car accident. I'm their legal guardian. The food I took was going to be thrown away and I needed it to feed my family. Robert's expression didn't soften. Everyone has a sob story. We can't run a business on pity. No, Laura said, her voice ice cold. But we can run one on basic human decency. Karen Taylor is not fired. In fact, I'm personally recommending her for a promotion to employee advocate, a new position I'll be creating to help staff navigate benefits and resources. You can't do that. Actually, I can. It's well within my authority as CFO. Laura turned to Karen. $52,000 a year, full benefits, childcare assistance. We'll discuss details tomorrow. Karen stared at Laura like she'd grown a second head. I don't understand. You kept 2 children alive and safe while working full-time for poverty wages. You did it with dignity and determination. That's exactly the kind of person we need helping others in similar situations. Tears streamed down Karen's face. She tried to speak, couldn't, just nodded. Robert threw his tablet onto the nearest counter. This is insane. Corporate will never approve this. Corporate will do exactly what I tell them to do. Now get back to work, all of you. The kitchen slowly returned to motion, employees exchanging glances heavy with shock and something that might have been hope. James caught Laura's eye across the room. She gave him the smallest nod, then walked back toward the office. James followed, closing the door behind them. That was incredible. Laura collapsed into the chair, hands shaking. That was terrifying. I just promised something I have no authority to deliver. But you'll fight for it. I'll fight for it. She looked up at him. We'll fight for it. Together. Why are you doing this? Because you were right. I was looking for exceptions that would let me feel good about a broken system. But there are no exceptions. There are just people trying to survive, and they all deserve better. James's phone buzzed, a message from Patricia. Brenda's asking for you. Can you come back? He showed Laura the screen. I need to go. Of course, I'll give you a ride. They drove back to the hospital in Laura's Mercedes, the silence between them different now. Comfortable almost, the quiet of two people who'd seen each other's vulnerabilities and chosen not to look away. At the hospital entrance, Laura put the car in park but didn't turn off the engine. James, he paused, hand on the door handle. Thank you for being here, for being real even when it was risky. James met her eyes in the dim light from the dashboard. For being here. Say it again. Laura blinked, confused. What? You said thank you for being here. Say it again. Understanding dawned. For being here. Again. For being here. James nodded. That's all any of us really need, someone who shows up. He got out of the car and walked into the hospital, leaving Laura sitting alone with tears on her face and the weight of choices she'd just made settling onto her shoulders. Inside, Brenda was awake and drawing pictures on a hospital-provided notepad. She looked up when James entered, her smile immediate and radiant. Daddy, look what I drew. The picture showed 3 stick figures again, but this time they were inside a building with a sign that read, Home. All 3 figures had circles around them that might have been hearts. That's beautiful, Sweet Pea. Who are they? You, me, and the sad lady. Except she's not sad anymore, see? I gave her a real smile that reaches her eyes. James sat beside the bed, taking in his daughter's simple wisdom. You're right, she's not sad anymore. Because we're her friends now, and friends make each other happy. Yes, they do. Brenda yawned, the drawing slipping from her fingers. Will you stay tonight? I'm not going anywhere. He held her hand as she drifted to sleep, counting her heartbeats, and thought about Laura Mitchell driving back to an empty house with the weight of an entire company's future pressing down on her. Thought about Karen Taylor going home to 2 children who would eat real meals tomorrow, who might actually have a chance at something better than survival. Thought about his father, sitting in an office 40 stories above street level, making decisions that destroyed lives without ever seeing the human cost. And James Robinson, sitting in a hospital room with his sleeping daughter, made his own decision about what kind of man he wanted to be. Not his father's son, just Brenda's dad trying to do the right thing even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. The call came at 6:47 a.m., jarring James awake in the hospital chair where he'd spent the night. William Robinson's name flashed on the screen, insistent and demanding even in digital form. James stepped into the hallway before answering, leaving Brenda asleep behind him. You missed the preliminary deadline. No greeting, no acknowledgement that James might have reasons for his silence. Just the flat statement of failure. Brenda's in the hospital. Heart complications. A pause that lasted 3 seconds too long. Is she stable? For now. They're doing more tests this morning. I see. William's voice remained unchanged, clinical. When can you deliver the Branch 47 report? James closed his eyes, pressing his forehead against the cold hospital wall. His father had just learned his granddaughter was hospitalized, and his primary concern was a spreadsheet. I need more time. The board meeting is Wednesday, 2 days from now. I'm aware. Then you understand that time is something we don't have. William's tone sharpened. I sent you there to find solutions, not to get distracted by personal matters. Personal matters? As if Brenda's failing heart was an inconvenience, a scheduling conflict to be worked around. My daughter comes first. Your daughter has excellent medical care. The report requires your immediate attention. James thought about Laura Mitchell standing in that kitchen, defending Karen Taylor with corporate policy she'd memorized specifically to protect people from systems designed to hurt them. Thought about the way she'd looked at him in the car, asking him to repeat those words because she needed to hear that someone valued her presence. What happened to Mom? The question landed like a grenade in the conversation's silence. What are you talking about? 16 years ago, when she was pregnant with me and sick. What happened? William's breathing changed, became controlled. Your mother and I divorced. You know this. I know you fired her. I found the termination papers. The silence stretched longer this time, heavy with decades of carefully maintained fiction crumbling. That was a business decision. She had cancer. She was carrying your child. She was an employee who couldn't fulfill her job requirements. I made the only decision possible under those circumstances. James felt something break inside his chest, a clean snap like a bone giving way under too much pressure. You let her die. Your mother made her own choices. She chose to leave me, chose to refuse financial help, chose pride over pragmatism. You offered her money? Several times. She refused every offer. Because Linda Robinson had understood something James was only now beginning to grasp, that accepting William's money would mean accepting his version of events, would mean admitting that her value was purely transactional, something that could be bought and discarded when it became inconvenient. She'd chosen dignity over survival, and it had killed her. I'm not giving you that report. William's voice went cold. Excuse me? You heard me. I'm not giving you ammunition to shut down Branch 47 and put 23 people out of work. You don't have that authority. Then fire me. Add me to the list of people you've discarded when they stopped being useful. James, the word came out sharp, a whip crack of paternal authority. You're emotional and exhausted. Take the day with Brenda. We'll discuss this tomorrow when you're thinking clearly. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in my life. And what I see is a man who built an empire on other people's suffering and convinced himself it was just good business. You have no idea what you're talking about, don't I? How much did you make last year, Dad? $600,000 in bonuses alone plus your base salary. Meanwhile, the woman who served me coffee at Branch 47 is feeding orphaned children with garbage because you decided employee meals weren't cost-effective. Every business makes difficult decisions. No. Every business makes choices, and you chose profit over people every single time. William's breath came harsh through the phone. If you don't deliver that report by Wednesday morning, I'll have security remove you from the building and strip your access to all company systems. Do it. I don't want access to your company anymore. You'll lose everything. Your salary, your benefits, your daughter's health insurance. The threat hung between them, calculated and cruel. William Robinson knew exactly where to strike, knew that Brenda's condition made insurance not just valuable but essential. James thought about Michael Davis, the fiction he'd built, working for poverty wages and still showing up every day with dignity intact. Thought about Karen Taylor starving herself to feed her siblings. Thought about his mother dying in a hospice bed because she'd refused to compromise her self-worth for financial security. Then I'll figure it out. Just like everyone else you've forced into impossible choices. He ended the call before his father could respond, hands shaking with adrenaline and something that felt like grief. The door to Brenda's room opened. Laura Mitchell stood in the hallway holding 2 coffee cups from the hospital cafeteria. I heard yelling. James accepted the coffee she offered, the cup warm against his palms. My father, demanding his report. What did you tell him? That he can go to hell. Laura's eyebrows rose. That's direct. He threatened to cut off Brenda's insurance if I don't comply. He can't do that. Cobra laws require them. He's William Robinson. He'll find a way. James sipped the coffee, barely tasting it. I just blew up my entire life for people I barely know. No, you made a choice about what kind of person you want to be. Laura leaned against the wall beside him. That takes courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they look the same. They stood in silence, drinking terrible hospital coffee while fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A nurse passed pushing a medication cart, wheels squeaking against linoleum. Laura spoke quietly. I called an emergency meeting with the board, tomorrow at 9 a.m. James turned to face her. You what? Your father wants his report, he'll get one. Just not the version he's expecting. Laura, you can't. I already did, and I'm not going alone. She met his eyes with steel determination. You're coming with me, as yourself. James Robinson, the man who spent 3 days washing dishes to understand what his father's company really does to people. He'll destroy you. He'll try. But I have data, documentation, and 18 months of corporate malfeasance to present. Laura's voice didn't waver. Plus, I have you, the owner's son, willing to testify that the current model is fundamentally broken. James thought about walking into that boardroom, facing his father across a conference table with witnesses present. Thought about burning every bridge he'd ever built in the corporate world. Thought about Brenda's drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands. Okay, I'm in. Laura nodded once, decisive. Then we need to prepare. After Brenda's tests, we'll work on the presentation. Dr. Park appeared at the end of the hallway, clipboard in hand. Mr. Robinson, we're ready to start the stress echo. James followed the doctor back into Brenda's room. His daughter was already awake, electrodes attached to her chest, nervous energy radiating from every small movement. Is it going to hurt? James took her hand. No, sweet pea. They're just going to have you walk on a special treadmill while they take pictures of your heart. Like at the gym Grandma goes to? Exactly like that. Will you stay with me? Dr. Park answered before James could. Dad can watch from the observation room. He'll be able to see you the whole time. They wheeled Brenda down the hallway to the cardiac testing suite, James and Laura following. Through the observation window, James watched technicians prepare his daughter for the procedure, adjusting equipment and explaining each step in voices designed to soothe. Brenda looked so small on that treadmill, dwarfed by medical machinery that cost more than most people made in a year. She waved at the window, and James waved back, forcing a smile he didn't feel. The test began. Brenda walked slowly at first, then faster as the technicians increased the treadmill's speed. They monitored her heart rate, her breathing, the rhythm of ventricles struggling to do what should come naturally. After 12 minutes, Dr. Park called a halt. Brenda stepped off the treadmill, breathing hard but grinning. I did it. You did great, sweetie. Just rest now while we look at the results. The doctor joined James and Laura in the observation room, pulling up images on a computer screen. James tried to make sense of the echocardiogram, the pulsing chambers and flowing blood rendered in grayscale. The regurgitation is significant. See here. Dr. Park pointed to an area where blood flowed backward through the mitral valve. Under stress, it's worsening. We're looking at surgical repair within the next 2 to 3 weeks. James absorbed the information like physical blows. 2 to 3 weeks, surgery, recovery, complications, costs. What's the success rate? 93% for pediatric mitral valve repair. Brenda's young and healthy otherwise. Those are significant advantages. And if we don't do the surgery? Dr. Park's expression softened. The heart will continue to compensate until it can't anymore. Heart failure, possibly within the year. The surgery isn't optional, Mr. Robinson. It's necessary. Laura's hand found James's shoulder, steadying. How soon can we schedule? I'll have my office contact you this afternoon with dates. We'll want to move quickly, but not so fast that we compromise preparation. After Dr. Park left, James stood at the window watching Brenda color in a book one of the nurses had given her. His daughter, who'd already lost her mother, now faced open-heart surgery because genetics had dealt her a faulty valve. I don't know how to pay for this. Laura squeezed his shoulder. We'll figure it out. My father will make sure I have nothing. No salary, no insurance, no access to family money. Then we fight him in court. Wrongful termination, denial of benefits, corporate negligence. James laughed bitterly. With what lawyer? What resources? With me. My money, my lawyers, my resources. Laura moved to stand beside him, both of them watching Brenda through the glass. You're not alone in this, James, not anymore. Why are you doing this? You barely know me. Because yesterday you let me read bedtime stories to your daughter. You trusted me with the most precious person in your life, even though I was a stranger. Laura's voice cracked slightly. And because 18 months ago when my mother was dying, I sat alone in a hospital room wishing someone cared enough to show up. James turned to face her fully. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be present. That's all anyone really needs. They returned to Brenda's room together. His daughter looked up from her coloring book, assessing them with the unnerving perceptiveness of children. Are you still sad, Miss Laura? Laura sat on the edge of the hospital bed. Not right now. Good. Sad is bad for hearts. That's what the nurses say. Your nurses are very smart. Brenda returned to her coloring, tongue poking out in concentration as she stayed carefully within the lines. Daddy, can Miss Laura have dinner with us when I go home? James glanced at Laura, who looked as surprised as he felt. That's up to Miss Laura. I'd like that very much. Brenda beamed. Good, because we're friends now. Friends eat together. Patricia arrived an hour later, bringing fresh clothes and Brenda's favorite stuffed animal, a purple elephant named Peanut that Keisha had bought at a zoo gift shop years ago. She paused when she saw Laura, surprise and curiosity flickering across her face. Patricia, this is Laura Mitchell. She's a friend. Patricia's handshake was firm, assessing. Any friend of James is welcome. Thank you for being here. Of course. James pulled his mother-in-law aside while Laura distracted Brenda with questions about the stuffed elephant. I need to tell you something about work, about my father. Patricia listened as James explained everything. The undercover assignment, the discoveries at Branch 47, Laura's planned confrontation with the board, William's threats to cut off insurance. When he finished, Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Keisha would be proud of you. James blinked. I just destroyed my career and potentially Brenda's healthcare coverage. You stood up for what's right. You chose people over profit. That's exactly the kind of man she wanted you to be. Patricia gripped his hands. We'll figure out the insurance. I have savings. We can apply for state assistance. There are programs for children with heart conditions. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. That's what family does. James embraced her, grateful beyond words. Laura approached. I should go. Give you time with Brenda. Wait. James pulled out his phone. What's your address? I'll pick you up tomorrow morning. We'll go to the board meeting together. Laura recited an address in Midtown Detroit, then hesitated. James, are you sure about this? Once we walk into that room, there's no going back. I'm sure. She nodded and left, her footsteps echoing down the hospital corridor. James spent the rest of the day with Brenda, playing card games and reading stories and pretending everything was normal. Patricia left at 6 to handle some errands, promising to return with dinner. Alone with his daughter, James felt the weight of tomorrow pressing down. Daddy, you look worried. Just thinking about grown-up stuff, Sweet Pea. Brenda set down her cards. Is it about Mommy? The question caught James off guard. What makes you think that? Because you get a special sad face when you think about her, different from regular sad. James wondered when his daughter had become so observant, then remembered she'd always been this way. He just hadn't been paying attention. I think about Mommy a lot, especially when I need to make hard choices. What would she tell you? James thought about Keisha, about the way she'd faced her cancer diagnosis with determination and grace, the way she'd held his hand during chemo sessions and told him stories to distract from the pain, the way she'd made him promise in those final days to take care of Brenda and to never become the kind of man who measured worth in dollars. She'd tell me to do the right thing, even when it's scary. Then that's what you should do. Brenda spoke with absolute certainty, as if the answer was obvious. You're very wise for almost 7. I know. Mommy told me I was wise the last time I saw her. James's throat tightened. She was right. That night, after Patricia returned and Brenda fell asleep, James sat in the hospital cafeteria with his laptop, building a presentation he prayed would change everything. He started with numbers, pulling data from company records about Branch 47's performance. Revenue decline, yes, but attributable to neighborhood demographic shifts, not employee incompetence. Turnover rates that exceeded industry averages by 73%, training costs that had tripled in 18 months. Then he added human stories. Karen Taylor working 52 hours a week and still unable to feed her family. Gary making extra food because he couldn't stand watching coworkers go hungry. Employees who showed up sick because they couldn't afford to miss shifts, who worked through injuries because the company health plan made basic care prohibitively expensive. He included his mother's termination papers dated 16 years ago, signed in William Robinson's distinctive scrawl, and he included calculations showing that reinstating employee meal programs, improving health coverage, and raising base wages would cost the company $3.2 million annually, while potentially saving $4.7 million in turnover-related expenses. Compassion wasn't just morally right, it was financially sound. James worked until midnight, then drove to Laura's address in Midtown. The building was modern glass and steel, a converted warehouse transformed into luxury condos. He texted her, "Outside if you want to review the presentation." She appeared in the lobby 5 minutes later, wearing sweatpants and a Michigan State hoodie, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger like this, softer, human in ways the CFO armor didn't allow. They sat in his car with the laptop balanced between them, reviewing slides and refining arguments. Laura caught inconsistencies James had missed, suggested reframings that made the data more compelling. At 2 a.m., she leaned back in the passenger seat, exhausted. We're ready. Are we? As ready as we can be. Laura turned to look at him. What happens if they reject this? If your father convinces the board to close Branch 47 anyway? Then we tried. That has to count for something. Does it? If we fail, people still lose their jobs. James thought about the question. My mother chose dignity over survival. It killed her, but she died knowing she hadn't compromised who she was for my father's money. He met Laura's eyes. Maybe that matters more than winning. Intent doesn't erase impact. The words hung between them, truth that couldn't be dismissed. No, but doing nothing guarantees failure. At least this way we fight. Laura reached across the console, took his hand. Thank you for reminding me why I got into this business in the first place. Why did you? I wanted to help people build better lives. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that people aren't just resources to be optimized. She squeezed his hand. You reminded me. James drove home in the pre-dawn darkness, exhaustion pulling at every muscle. But when he collapsed into bed at 3:30 a.m., his mind wouldn't stop racing. Tomorrow he'd walk into a boardroom and tell 8 powerful executives that everything they'd built was fundamentally broken. He'd face his father across a conference table and burn every bridge they'd ever constructed. And he had no idea if it would change anything. His phone buzzed. A text from Laura. "Can't sleep. Keep thinking about what you said. Dignity versus survival. Is there a version where we get both?" James typed a response. "I think that's what we're fighting for, a world where people don't have to choose. That's a nice dream. Dreams are how change starts. You sound like your daughter. She'd be proud." James smiled in the darkness. "She'd tell me to stop texting and go to sleep. Smart kid." "Good night, James." "Good night, Laura." He set his phone on the nightstand and closed his eyes, and for the first time in 3 days he slept. The alarm woke him at 7. James showered, dressed in the suit he'd worn to his mother's funeral, the only formal clothing he owned that didn't bear his father's influence. Black wool, simple cut, no designer labels. He stopped at the hospital on his way to pick up Laura. Brenda was awake, eating breakfast with more appetite than she'd shown in days. "You look fancy, Daddy. Big meeting today. Are you going to fight the bad guys?" James knelt beside her bed. "Something like that." Brenda put down her orange juice. "Will you win?" "I don't know, sweet pea. Sometimes doing the right thing means losing everything. Mommy used to say that brave isn't the same as not scared." James felt his eyes burn. "When did she tell you that?" "Right before she went to the hospital the last time. She said she was scared, but she was going to be brave anyway." He pulled his daughter into a careful hug, mindful of her IV and monitor wires. "I love you so much." "I love you too. Go fight the bad guys." Patricia walked him to the elevator, her expression serious. "Whatever happens today, you come back to us, understand? You walk away if you have to. Brenda needs you alive and whole, not destroyed trying to save the world." "I'll be careful." "I mean it, James. Some battles aren't worth the cost." He kissed her cheek. "I'll be back tonight. I promise." Laura was waiting outside her building, dressed in a navy suit that screamed power and authority. She climbed into his car, carrying her laptop bag and a large coffee. "Ready?" "No, but we're doing this anyway." The drive to Hayes Family Restaurant's headquarters took 25 minutes through morning traffic. Neither of them spoke, both lost in preparation and dread. The building loomed 40 stories above downtown Detroit, all glass and steel and corporate ambition. James had grown up coming here, had learned to read balance sheets in offices on the 38th floor, had absorbed business principles like other children learned multiplication tables. It had never felt hostile before. They rode the elevator in silence, other passengers getting off at lower floors until James and Laura stood alone, watching the numbers climb. 36, 37, 38. The doors opened onto the executive floor, all marble and modern art and furniture that cost more than most people made in a year. Margaret, William's assistant, looked up from her desk with surprise. "James, your father didn't mention you'd be attending." "It's a surprise." "I see." Her fingers flew across her keyboard. "The board is gathering now. You can go straight in." The conference room occupied the building's northeast corner, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the Detroit River and Windsor beyond. 8 executives sat around an oval table, William at the head, reviewing documents on tablets. Every head turned when James walked through the door with Laura beside him. William's expression went from surprise to anger to controlled neutrality in 3 seconds. "James, you're not on the agenda." "I'm making myself on the agenda." Laura moved to the presentation screen, connecting her laptop. "Thank you all for accommodating this emergency session. What we're about to share requires your immediate attention." Patricia Hayes, the board's oldest member and no relation to James, despite sharing his father's name, leaned forward. "William, what's going on?" "My son appears to have forgotten his place." "My place?" James laughed without humor. "Let me tell you about my place. For 3 days, I washed dishes at Branch 47, living on minimum wage, trying to understand why that location fails while others succeed. Murmurs rippled through the board. Several executives glanced at William, who sat perfectly still. And what I found was systematic neglect bordering on criminal negligence. Laura pulled up the first slide showing Branch 47's financial data. This location loses money because we've deliberately underfunded it. Employee turnover is 140% annually, training costs have tripled, and customer satisfaction has dropped 15 points. She advanced to the next slide, showing the meal program elimination timeline correlated with declining performance. 8 months ago, corporate eliminated staff meals to save $1.8 million annually. Since then, we've spent $2.4 million in turnover-related expenses across all locations. We saved nothing. We just shifted costs while destroying employee morale. William's voice cut through. Mitchell, you're out of line. No, Mr. Robinson, I'm doing my job, which is ensuring this company operates efficiently and ethically. Laura advanced to the next slide. Employee stories, anonymized but detailed. Karen Taylor became Employee A, 24, supporting 2 orphaned siblings on $14.50 per hour. The board members read in silence, expressions shifting from irritation to discomfort. James stood. My mother was Employee B, though you all knew her as Linda Robinson. 16 years ago, when she was pregnant with me and fighting cancer, this company fired her for excessive medical leave. Patricia Hayes gasped audibly. William, tell me that's not true. William's jaw clenched. Personnel decisions from 16 years ago have no bearing on current operations. They have every bearing. James pulled out the termination papers, passed copies around the table. My mother died 2 years ago in a hospice facility, unable to afford cancer treatment because the company she gave 16 years of her life to discarded her when she needed help most. The room went silent. And now we're doing the same thing to 23 current employees. We're forcing them to choose between rent and food, between showing up sick or losing their jobs, between dignity and survival. Laura advanced to financial projections. Here's what we're proposing. Reinstate the meal program at all locations. Improve health coverage with lower deductibles. Raise base wages to $17.50 per hour. Total cost, $3.2 million annually. We can't afford, William started. Projected savings from reduced turnover, improved productivity, and better customer satisfaction, $4.7 million annually. Net gain to the company, $1.5 million. The numbers sat on the screen, undeniable. Robert Martinez, the board's financial expert, leaned forward. These projections are based on what assumptions? Laura walked through the methodology, citing industry studies and internal data. James watched his father's face, seeing the calculation happening behind those cold eyes. Even if your numbers are correct, William said carefully, you're proposing we prioritize employee welfare over shareholder returns. I'm proposing we do both. Happy employees work harder, stay longer, and provide better service. That increases revenue and shareholder value. Or it sets a precedent that empowers employees to make unreasonable demands. James stepped forward. Unreasonable demands like eating, like affording health care, like surviving on wages we pay them? This company provides jobs. What employees do with those wages is their responsibility. No. The word came out harder than James intended. We don't get to abdicate responsibility for the consequences of our policies. If someone working full-time for us can't afford food, that's our failure, not theirs. William stood, facing James across the table. You've been an employee for 3 days and suddenly you're an expert on business ethics? I'm your son who watched his mother die because you valued policy over people. I'm Brenda's father. Terrified her heart condition will bankrupt us because the insurance this company provides is designed to minimize coverage, not maximize care. Your personal circumstances don't dictate corporate policy. They should. James' voice rose. Every decision we make should consider the human cost. Every policy should ask if we'd be willing to live under it ourselves. Patricia Hayes cleared her throat. I move to vote on Ms. Mitchell's proposal. William's head snapped toward her. This isn't a voting matter. As CEO, you serve at the board's pleasure, and I'm calling for a vote. Patricia looked around the table. All in favor of implementing the proposed employee welfare restructuring? Hands went up slowly. Patricia Hayes, Robert Martinez, 3 others, 5 votes in favor. Opposed? William and 2 others raised their hands, 3 votes against. Patricia smiled. Motion carries. Ms. Mitchell, you'll work with operations to implement these changes across all locations within 90 days. William's face went white with rage. This is a mistake. You're setting a precedent that will destroy this company's profitability. Or save it. Laura closed her laptop. We'll know in 6 months when we review the data. The meeting dissolved, board members gathering papers and murmuring. James stood frozen, unable to process that they'd actually won. William approached, his voice low and venomous. You think you've accomplished something? All you've done is prove you're not capable of leading this company. When I step down, the board will choose someone else. I don't want to lead your company, Dad. I want to fix it. There's a difference. You've chosen her over your own family. William's eyes cut to Laura. I've chosen people over profit. That's what Mom would have wanted. Your mother was a fool who died for her pride. James felt the words land like physical blows, but he didn't flinch. She died with her dignity intact. That's more than you'll ever have. He walked away before his father could respond, Laura falling into step beside him. They rode the elevator down in slants, 40 floors of descent that felt like falling. In the parking garage, Laura finally spoke. We did it. Did we? My father's right. This doesn't fix everything. No, but it's a start. Laura turned to face him. James, what you did up there, standing up to your father in front of the entire board, that took more courage than I've seen in 10 years of corporate work. I just told the truth. The truth is the hardest thing to tell. Laura stepped closer, especially when it costs you everything. James thought about his father's face, the cold fury in those eyes. Thought about the certainty that their relationship, already fractured, was now irreparable. I need to get to the hospital. Brenda's probably wondering what happened. I'll come with you, if that's okay. They drove to Children's Hospital where Brenda was drawing another picture. This one showed a building with people holding hands in a circle around it. Did you win, Daddy? James sat on the edge of her bed. We did, Sweet Pea. We changed some rules so people don't have to be hungry anymore. Good, being hungry is sad. Brenda looked at Laura. Are you happy now? Your smile looks more real. Laura's eyes glistened. Yes, I'm happy now. Good. Can we all get ice cream to celebrate? Patricia laughed from the corner. I think that can be arranged. 3 weeks later, Brenda's surgery was scheduled. James spent the night before in her hospital room, reading stories until she fell asleep. Laura had stayed close through everything, helping navigate insurance complications, sitting through doctor consultations, just being present in ways that mattered. The morning of surgery, they wheeled Brenda away at 6:30 a.m. She waved from the gurney, brave and small. See you soon, Daddy. See you soon, Sweet Pea. The waiting room became James's entire world for the next 6 hours. Laura sat beside him, sometimes talking, sometimes just existing in the same space. Patricia paced near the windows. Other families waited with their own dread, united in helplessness. At 12:47 p.m., Dr. Park emerged in surgical scrubs. The repair was successful. Brenda's in recovery now. You can see her in about an hour. James buried his face in his hands and wept. Laura's arms wrapped around him, holding him together while he fell apart. 2 months later, Branch 47 reopened after renovations. The meal station gleamed, offering fresh food to anyone wearing a company uniform. New health coverage meant employees could actually afford to see doctors. Wages of $17.50 per hour didn't solve poverty, but they made survival possible. Karen Taylor ran the new employee advocacy program, helping workers navigate benefits and resources. Gary still cooked, but he no longer had to pretend food was accidental. Jennifer had quit to take a better job elsewhere, finally believing she deserved more. And James Robinson, no longer undercover, stood beside Laura Mitchell as they toured the transformed location. "It's working," Laura said, reviewing satisfaction scores on her tablet. Turnover is down 68%. Revenue is up 34%. Customer complaints have dropped to almost zero. Turns out people work better when they're not starving. Revolutionary concept. They walked outside, where autumn was surrendering to winter. James's phone buzzed with a photo from Patricia. Brenda at school, healthy and whole, her scar hidden beneath a purple sweater. "She's doing well?" "Better than well. She ran a mile in gym class yesterday. Doctor says her heart function is normal." Laura smiled. "Good. She deserves normal." They stood in comfortable silence, watching traffic pass. James thought about his father, who'd stopped returning calls months ago. Thought about his mother, who he hoped would be proud. Thought about Keisha and whether she could see what he'd become. Laura touched his arm. "What are you thinking?" "That dignity and survival don't have to be opposites. We just have to build systems that honor both." "Is that what we're doing?" "Trying to. One restaurant at a time." Laura's hand found his, fingers intertwining. "That's enough. It has to be enough." And standing there in the Detroit cold, James Robinson believed her. Because sometimes the right thing was also the hard thing and you did it anyway. Because people weren't numbers on spreadsheets. They were Karen Taylor feeding orphaned children. They were Gary making extra burgers with quiet compassion. They were his mother choosing dignity in her final days. They were Brenda, wise beyond her years, reminding him that real smiles reached your eyes. They were Laura, who'd risked everything to stand beside a man she barely knew because showing up mattered more than safety. And they were worth fighting for, even when the fight cost everything, especially then.